Hello, dear friends, lovely audiences. Happy New Year to you. This is the first show ever for the year of 2018, brand new year. Brand new, so brand new that we start everything this morning on the second day of January. And with 2018, which is supposed to be lots of hope, and lots of people are making New Year resolutions, including me, is here today, right at the same very moment. So to start the very show for the year 2018, we want to do it very sober-minded analysis of our legal system. And why I put it on top of everything, because I find out on one hand, lots of people know the system. It is not everybody know the system, know our rights. That's a pity. And on the other, lots of people knowing too much. So they launch a frivolous lawsuits abusing the law system that clogs the law system. With me today on the Serious Talk, we want to later on name the show for We the People. Well, suppose we deserve it. But right now, as a warm-up, we call it Our Rights, Knowing Our Rights versus Our System. All right. So with me is my good friend, trial attorney, Mr. Thomas Johnson.
Hi. Happy New Year, Jack.
All right. Happy New Year to you. All right.
Nice to be back.
All right. Mr. Johnson is a miracle, I would say. And he was attorney, and he went to Iraq. He did his service to this great nation, and came back whole peace, not a hair lost, right? Not a hair lost. All right, and he picking up his attorney job. He is now a trial attorney, and to me, he's everything. Now, to the subject today, though, I believe that you will bring us, as the day go by, with the We the People show, the understanding of some basic, shall we?
Sure. What makes our country, I think, so special, if we look at all the countries in the world, is the rights that we give to the people here. And in the United States, citizens like you and I have the right to protection from the courts. So what do our freedoms mean? Our freedoms mean that we're free from harm. Our families aren't going to be harmed. We're free from unfair treatment. And how do we enforce those rights? Okay, let's say we're hurt because someone wasn't careful enough, or we were hurt because the government was mean-spirited and punished us for something that we said. As citizens, what do we do for something like that? And what our Constitution says is that the courtrooms are a place where citizens can go, even in cases against the government, and receive justice. So we talk about the Bill of Rights, and that's the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. First Amendment is what?
What's freedom of expression?
Yeah, exactly. Free speech.
Right.
Everybody knows about
speech,
that.
yes.
Freedom of the press, right? Which is so important for what you do. And then the Second Amendment, people go crazy about that, and it's guns.
Yeah, bear arms.
Don't take my guns from me, because we need our guns to protect ourselves. Well, the Seventh Amendment is the constitutional right to a civil jury trial. And it's that right, Jack, that I think that will protect people more than guns ever will. And it's the right that allows people to get justice when they've been harmed by a corporation or another person or the government. And so even if somebody's so powerful and so wealthy as a big corporation harms a citizen, that citizen has a place where she is as powerful as the government or the biggest corporation. And that's how our system's designed.
All right. To the system, of course, we deserve lots of education. And to average Joe, average Sue, who did not go to law school though, we only know that's a court, that's a judge, that's a verdict, that's a decision, that's the news on the TV. We do not exactly know. For example, to lots of people, even including myself or folks around me, a defense attorney's job is to clear you up from criminality. In other words, if I kill, right? And to the understanding, they say the defense attorney's job, even go as a trial attorney's job, is to make sure that everybody believes that you did not kill. Was that right, or exaggeration, or not to that extent?
Well, that's one function, and a lawyer has an important function in a courtroom. Her job or his job is to tell the story on behalf of his or her client. The judge has to make sure that people are following the rules of evidence. But it's the jury that has the most important job, and they're the best people for it. Okay, so you and I, okay, so you'll be 50 this year, so you have 50 years of life experience. I now have 42 years of life experience. Your camera operators have years of life experience. The producer, years of life experience. And you put those people together, and they are experts on knowing right from wrong, what's true and what's not true, what's fair and what's not fair. We don't need special training for that, because inside we know that. And so then when we see a case put on as jurors, we bring our own common sense, and we're able to talk to you about your common sense, and the camera operators and the producers. And we come to a fair outcome and say, I don't trust this. I believe this is what happened. And it's the jury that has all the power to do that. And that's what makes our system so great. And I think that jurors, members of the community that come together with very different backgrounds, are so much better at finding out what really happened than the lawyers who have a client to represent, or even the judge whose job it is to follow the law and make sure the right evidence comes in. Jurors get it right almost every time.
That's exactly the amazing part. That's the exactly amazing part. In other countries, as you see on TV, there's a hammer, bong knocks it, the judge says you're guilty or you're not, something like that. Okay, and of course in Hong Kong, other areas, they do have the jury system, but in lots of countries they don't have that. But the thing is that started to amaze me was that in the whole process of a hearing, lots of high-profile technology, methodology whatsoever are applied, right? People are talking about supreme levels of specific science. And then when it comes to decision, you selected those people who have no background or no legal background, just from common sense, to make a decision, to say, I believe he did kill or not kill, right? So that's the amazing part. They are kind of one from another, but they work together. Am I right understanding?
No, you are right. And you get into the idea of expert witnesses. Okay, so let's talk about the role that science has in a trial. Okay, and people talk about DNA evidence. Let's just talk about that for a little bit.
Okay.
So DNA evidence is one particular piece of scientific evidence that can come into a story. Okay. Let's say the story's about whether or not I was in your studio today here. Okay. How would we prove that? Well, we prove it because I'm on tape. And sometimes cases are that close or that simple. Okay, but what if there was no camera here? Then we'd have eyewitness testimony.
I see.
You would be able to testify, I saw Thomas Johnston on January 2nd sitting in this chair. What other evidence would we have? Well, my fingerprints are now on your table. Okay, so if somebody wanted to test my prints, they would find that my prints on your table match the prints on my hands.
Uh-huh.
And now that if I'm a little nervous, I've left sweat here. And so my DNA is now left on your table, and that can be tested. Okay, so there's direct evidence. I saw Johnston at this table on January 2nd. And then there's indirect evidence. I didn't see him there. There were no cameras there. But we tested the sweat on the table, and we found that his prints were there, or and his DNA was there. So each of that type of evidence is put in front of a jury, and they can decide whether or not they're persuaded by that or not. So the most persuasive evidence, I think, is often cameras.
All right.
The second part might be eyewitness testimony, but what we know is people see and perceive things very differently.
All right.
You're going to see something different than another person will.
Yeah. There's lots of times there are concepts are confusing. For example, you mentioned taping, right? So what kind of a taping can be produced into court as evidence, to what extent, and versus the privacy, stuff like that. If I stick into my neighbor's house and I put a camera there, then I did discover, the taping did discover something wrong, right? Can I or may I present it to court, though? Those are the questions that every Joe and Sue do not understand. My lovely audience and my dear friends, for a whole year last year, we've been thinking about doing some legal specialized show for the education to our audiences. And finally, we're starting it. We're not actually doing it, we're just warming up. With me, with the warming up, is my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnson, a famous trial attorney. He smiles all the time, but he bites in court. I know him. All right. So let's take a moment out. When we come back, we'll just pick up those points by points, because points do speak. If you connect the dots, though, you really see a line, right? Okay. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hello, dear friends, lovely audiences. Welcome back to the show. I never thought I would be in court myself as a criminal. However, to understand something, the logic, how the system works, is really, really important, especially for a show host, right? And on a day-to-day basis, knowing and unknowing, there's a big difference, right, of our system. So we do know on one hand that we have a system that we do not quite understand, and on the other, we see our system is being clogged up by frivolous lawsuits. We want to make a clear distinction in between. We want to be citizens responsible, citizens understanding, educated, and yet we want to do the right thing. With me today is my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnston. Thomas Johnston has a big name. He returned from Iraq with lots of honor, lots of this, and he's a trial attorney. And with him, we try to get some understanding of some basic, right? So with the taping I just said, I did myself into my neighbor's house. So may I present it in court?
No. And
no.
What we're talking about now is the role of the judge. And the judge in a trial gets to decide what type of evidence can be played at a trial and presented at a trial. And in a criminal case, the government cannot go into somebody's home without a warrant and tape. You can't do that. And so the judge would say that can't come in to prove whether or not the crime occurred. In a civil case, the judge would likely do the same thing and say, you cannot take evidence when someone has a reasonable expectation of privacy and use that against that person. And that evidence would probably be excluded. Judge would say, no, that's not fair. That's not how we prove our cases. And so that's the role of the judge to decide what the jury gets to see. And I would encourage your viewers to go to jury service and to, if they get a summons, go to court and be a juror. Don't try to get off a jury service, because when they're in the system and they're part of it, they're going to see how well it really works. And when you say frivolous lawsuits, many cases are lost. So the person that brings a lawsuit might lose that case. And maybe it's about 50-50 on when a case is won and when a case is lost. And there's a lot of reasons why people see things differently. But it doesn't mean that the case never should have been brought. Because maybe that person had a lot of evidence, but the jury wanted more. Or maybe the jury saw something different than the person who brought the case. But what you're going to find is that about half the cases are won and half the cases are lost. And the juries are the best guardians to make sure that only righteous cases will win. And they do it all the time.
Whenever a case goes to trial, though, it indicates that all other resources are exhausted. Every possibilities are tried, right? So even reconciliation whatsoever are tried many times. So it's decided to go till the very end. Then you kick in as a trial attorney. Am I right?
Well, sure. So let's say we have a lawsuit and someone's been very badly injured or killed. Okay. So we bring a lawsuit on behalf of the family of someone who was killed. Let's say in a motorcycle crash. The insurance company that's representing the person that killed the motorcyclist is going to fight the case and say it wasn't our fault, or it was the motorcyclist's fault, or it was someone else's fault. There'll be a big fight for about a year with people taking depositions and finding out the evidence. And then there'll be an opportunity to settle the case in a compromise. And a case might settle, many cases do. But when a case settles, for what I think is, it's always partial justice, and it's not full justice. And I think full justice normally only comes when a jury gets to decide that.
All right.
When a jury says what happened to this family is wrong, and we're going to give money to equal that amount of harm. And then that can be healing too. There's a healing power to justice. And the only way to get that is to not settle and say, I'm going to try the case, and we're going to win the case. And that's what I think is often a better outcome for people, is if they try their cases.
Do you handle a malpractice case?
Medical malpractice? Oh, I'm very glad you brought that up.
Oh, yeah.
I do. But lawyers who do what I do, and that is try civil cases, that high stakes civil cases, are taking less and less medical malpractice cases. In California, we are entitled to two types of money for damages. Economic, which is loss of earnings, and then non-economic, which is pain and suffering. In about 1977 in California, California capped non-economic damage in medical malpractice cases to $250,000. Okay. So let's take a case, a real case that I represented.
Okay.
7-day-old child dies. The hospital fails to diagnose an obstruction in the ureter valve. Urine backs up, becomes infected, and a child dies a horrible and painful death. His mother comes to me and says, can we do something? We send the records to a doctor who says this is wrong. The most that family's entitled to is $250,000 before attorney's fees or costs. Because that's non-economic damage. Okay. If it was any other type of case, a car crash case, a fire, defective product, A case like that would be worth tens of millions of dollars. But what the jury doesn't know is that in a case like this, it's only $250,000. And here's the worst part, Jack.
That I never thought of. Yeah.
The worst part of it is this. Since 1977, that number has never been adjusted for inflation. So $250,000 in 1977 is worth about $900,000 now.
Yeah, all right.
But it has never been adjusted to now. And guess what? It hasn't made any difference for doctors' insurance. The big argument was that healthcare prices are too high because doctors are being sued. How are healthcare prices now? Way too high. Has it made our medicine any better? No. All that's happening is very young people and very old people who aren't making any money are getting treated unfairly with
So
these
did you
things.
end up presenting the mother?
Yes. I mean, we had to. Okay.
What's the result?
Well, 250,000. We can get the maximum available. But some cases you have to take. But it's outrageous that there would be that cap on something like that. Particularly outrageous that it's never been adjusted for inflation. There's not one good reason that anyone can say why there hasn't been that adjustment. And I think it's a shame on our legislators who haven't gone to fight against these big insurance companies and these doctors groups who are so powerful and say, hey, we need to fix this. We need to sit down and adjust this to either to have to rise with inflation. Otherwise, it's just terrible, and nobody knows it until they've lost a loved one.
It is very important for our audience to know not only the right, but also the system. For example, $250,000 limit, cap, I've never heard of. The same thing happens, somebody dies? Dies from the accident?
Yeah, 250.
250.
Loses an arm, 250 for pain and suffering. Loses an eye, 250. Face burned, 250. Paralyzed, 250 for medical negligence.
How about somebody adult who lost a life?
Pardon me?
Okay. Probably let's take a very short moment now. When we come back, probably I'll give you a friend of mine's sample case, right? And to see if justice was served. So, my dear audiences, this discussion is very useful and very necessary. We would like to make sure that our audiences understand our right versus our system. And well, you know what? This is very educational. Stay with us, please. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audience, my dear fellow Americans. It is rather important we understand our legal system. To understand our legal system, we make it a New Year resolution, one of the New Year resolutions for 2018, to get into court, understand our court system, understand our legal system, understand some of the basics that we need to know. Right? To that, my good friend, the trial attorney Thomas Johnston, is invited to come to the show to do it with me, and we'll do many times. We haven't decided yet, but we will know. We know it is rather important. Back to the medical malpractice area. I have a friend, 36 years old, a woman, who died at childbirth at one major hospital. I don't want to mention the name. First, she had a wrong pregnancy with the placenta problems, which is located right at the open of the uterus, which was supposed to be terminated by the book anyway. And the doctor, her family doctor, failed to diagnose that. And then on the day of the occurrence, a day of clasping, she ended at one of the local medical center. Once again, I'm not mentioning the name. the clinic, I mean the local hospital, let her sit on the chair, not lie, on the chair for 8 hours before they transfer it to the medical center downtown. Right. And then once there, she had a limited amount of blood left. And then they started the infusion all the way until they started to do the operation. At the operation, without determining where it is, what it is inside the uterus, the doctor, the physician, from his experiences, the uterus opening of the uterus is the best place to cut. So he cut it from at that point, at that exact spot that kills the placenta, which produces the clogging agent. And the baby was saved. The baby, due to the lack of oxygen, a whole pregnancy though, kind of like this, right? And mother died. So for this, the lawsuit went for like 2-something years. I don't know. I didn't know how they ended up. So, do you think it has a very strong case, this lady?
Well, first we have to take a second and absorb the tragedy of what happened to her. When you talk about that she's for delivery, that is the highlight of people's lives. And most of the time, oftentimes, doesn't have to be, but there's a father. And at 36 years old, sometimes there's other children. And this mother is the center of society, the center of this family. And so her loss is irreplaceable to that family, to that little society. And when a child's born with very serious problems, neurological problems, it sounds like, that child will carry with her or him those problems for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
So this is the most serious type of cases that are handled in the court.
And she lost her life.
She lost a life, and a family lost a mother and a wife, and a child has neurological problems that she will carry with her for the rest of her life. Okay? So what happens in a case like this is, the first thing is the investigation. So for a case to be brought against a doctor, another doctor in the same discipline has to say that that doctor did something that an ordinarily prudent doctor would not have done. And what is complicated in this case is that you have different disciplines. So it sounds like you have emergency medicine. What happened when the patient presented at an emergency room? Did they do the right thing? So an emergency room physician would have to say, I've reviewed all the facts and I think that they did. Now there was a surgeon, okay? Did the surgeon act appropriately? Another surgeon would have to look at that and say, you know what, I think that there was something that that doctor did that another doctor would not have done, a reasonably prudent doctor would not have done. And then there's the general practitioner or the OBGYN that followed the mother. Another person would, in those two disciplines, would have to say what happened here was okay or not. And I think that that is appropriate. I think that really medicine is difficult and it's not precise. So I think it's appropriate that only another doctor can criticize a doctor in court. I'm okay with that, okay? What I'm not okay with is with the loss of this mother to her family. Let's say that she was a stay-at-home mom, okay? At 36 years old, the most that family
She was the major breadwinner.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
As the breadwinner, she would be entitled to her future loss of earnings. So what she was going to make to retirement, her family could obtain that. That's the economic loss. There's not a cap on that. So the family that lost a mother who's the breadwinner could get her loss of earnings. Okay.
The house was recapped, by the bank right away.
It's terrible.
Terrible,
it's a terrible situation, Jack.
Terrible, yeah.
But what I want to focus on is this non-economic loss. Okay, the pain and suffering of the family.
Okay.
Okay, that case, we had a similar case for a person about her age with a family,
Mm-hmm.
that death is worth to some juries in LA County up to $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
To this family, that would have been reduced to $250,000 before attorney's fees and costs. Okay, and that isn't right. But let's talk about it this way. Let's say she was not a breadwinner. She was a stay-at-home mom.
Mm-hmm.
Why is her death worth less than a breadwinner's death? It's not.
It's not
And it
fair.
shouldn't be. It's not fair.
Not fair. Yeah,
it's not fair.
Life's a life. Yes.
Yes. So what we've done in California is we've created a situation where non-wage earning, non-breadwinner, stay-at-home mothers, children, and old people who are not working anymore, their lives are worth less than people like a breadwinner who dies. And that's not, I don't think that that's what we as Californians
That exactly
would tolerate.
creates an arguing point, right? And well, the question asking in court is that, do you believe this person's life worth less than the other?
Yes.
Of course, nobody can say that, right? It is based on those doctor analysis amongst themselves that you make your arguing point, and the points are heard by the jurors, and then they make decisions. Am I right?
Yes. So the doctor will say, I did everything okay. Even if there's a bad outcome, I did okay. Then the person who brought the case will have an expert come in, a physician, and say, this is what this doctor did wrong. And then the doctor will have another expert, another doctor say this doctor did was right. And it'll be up to the jury to decide who's right and who's wrong. So doctors are so powerful and hospitals are powerful, and I'm okay with that. Okay? I mean, it's hard to be a doctor. It's hard to make a hospital. So I think that their status is okay. I think it's important. But what's great about our court system is that a person with no status, a person who's poor or forgotten, when that person's in court, she's as powerful as the most powerful hospital or doctor in our state. And the jury system allows her to have an even playing field to decide what happened, if it's right or not.
That's the fair part, the equality is talking about.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So of course that could be enough for a malpractice case, medical practice, but sometimes with the criminal cases, me myself, probably I want to lay this question, take a break, and come back to discuss about it. Is the O.J. Simpson case? What? Are you okay to talk about it?
Oh, sure.
Okay. What gives me the most head scratching is that how come he was innocent with the criminal case and guilty with the civil case? They're contradictory to each other. Right? So those are the cases. I followed the whole case those years, 1994, I believe, and from A to Z. Right. So, my dear friend, today we're getting to know the law. By getting to know the law, we want to make it educational to our audiences as one of the New Year resolution to understand our legal system, our right, and to do the right thing. Right. So, with me is my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnson, a trial attorney, answering all those kind of hard to answer questions. Right. Stay with us. Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences, dear fellow Americans. Welcome back to the show, the Knowing the Right and / Our System show, which is a warm-up for our future show, We the People. With me today is my good friend, trial attorney Thomas Johnson. And Mr. Johnson has been practicing law for so many years. And the good part is that he is the one that plays at the very end of the trial stage. And at that stage, you have lots of story to tell. And well, you know what? It's been a long time, ever since 1994. I have been bothered by the O.J. Simpson case. Now that I have him next to me, starting the show with, I would still want to hang on with it a little bit to find out if justice was served or was not served at the criminal court of O.J. Simpson. So, may I please?
Please.
Okay, very good. So, to make a long story short, all right, to forget your attorney, forget everybody, Jack, everybody, do you believe that O.J. has killed? Hard one.
How do I personally feel about that?
Yeah.
Well, I think he probably did it. But
Okay.
as a person that knows what I've seen on TV or the idea in society that this is, I think that most people feel that way, right? That, this is a crime and this is probably how it happened, and it seems like O.J. got away with it, right? That's the feeling I think that almost everybody has. But that doesn't mean in our society that a man should be convicted of murder because of that. And I think that if O.J.'s lawyers had said to the jury at the beginning of the case, who thinks O.J. did it, a lot of hands would go up if people were being honest with themselves. But that's not how we prosecute criminals here. Whether we have a feeling of it or do we think it, no, that's not how we do it. Criminals are only convicted, people are only convicted, citizens are only convicted if the evidence shows beyond it a reasonable doubt that he did it. And that jury did not feel that the evidence was shown beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's that jury's right to do that, and I respect them for it. You look at the evidence, that case was well tried by the defense. Robert Shapiro, Johnny Cochran, they did an unbelievably good job for their client. And the prosecution made some mistakes in my view. But what that jury decided was that the evidence presented to them did not convince them beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty. And maybe it was the glove, maybe it was the racist detective, maybe that was enough to them where they thought, I have some doubt that he did this. And that jury had the courage to come up with a verdict that they had to have known was going to be hugely unpopular. And they did it anyway. And I respect the fact that the system worked that way, even if I think that maybe he did do it, because we don't convict people based on some guy on TV saying, hey, I think maybe he did that. Okay, that's the criminal case. How can there be one jury on a criminal case find him not guilty, and the civil case find him to be responsible for the death?
That is the part.
Okay, so O.J. was defended by Bob and Phil Baker, who I think are the best lawyers in town. Civil case. He was as well represented in the civil case as he was in the criminal case. So why did it happen? The civil case has a different standard of proof. So in the criminal case, if I can, if this is a scale, beyond a reasonable doubt means there's so much evidence that the scale goes like this. Okay?
Extremely.
There's no reasonable doubt in my mind that this man committed this murder. The jury didn't get there. Okay? 12-0. 12 jurors didn't get there. Okay? That wasn't a hung jury.
All right.
12 jurors said no. That's powerful.
It's an absolute majority.
Right. So let's go back to civil case. Okay? In the civil case, the person bringing the case has to prove that it's more likely true than not true.
Okay.
Okay, you see the difference? All you have to show is a little bit more.
I see.
So in a civil jury, you could look at the evidence and say, well, I probably think he did it. And in a civil case, that's going to count. But in a criminal case, probably think he did it isn't going to work, because he or she has to say, I'm convinced that beyond a reasonable doubt this person did it. So that's how you could have
that
two
kind
different
of balance has to show, to appear, or to happen with each of the 12 jurors.
Exactly.
Yeah, they all feel that way,
Yes.
right? I may feel that he did kill, but the evidence does not make me feel that way. Am I right?
Right. So each of the jurors is a separate judge of the evidence. And then they have a vote at the end. And in criminal, it has to be 12-0. In civil, it can be 9-3.
Still confusing though. For a case like OJ, it is a killing thing, right? So to go to the very root of the story though, if he didn't kill, forget evidence part, forget the scale part though. If he didn't kill, if the criminal court did not confirm him killed, so he did not kill. Can we use that as a foundation to move it to civil case, to use as a foundation that everybody should believe that he has not killed?
Only this way. If the jury had found beyond a reasonable doubt that he had killed, the jury in the civil case that came later, that would be deemed as proof.
I see what you mean there.
But it doesn't work the other way, because the civil jury is only deciding like this. That can't be applied to a later criminal case that has to decide it this way. So if there's a higher burden of proof, like in a criminal case, it can then be used if there's a lower burden of proof in a civil case. But the not guilty doesn't mean not liable either. Okay, it's different.
You can't use it the other way.
Right.
Only if the criminal court confirms he did kill, then the he did kill conclusion could be adopted, not adopted, impressed to people to the civil case. Am I right?
Yeah, you're exactly, Jack. You got it's very complicated, but you got it right. Yeah, I want to clear up a point with you if I can.
Please.
And I was, I didn't want to bring it up, but I feel like we're friends and I should.
Yeah, sure. Please.
I don't like to get any credit for my time in the service because I think I've had so much, and I don't think it's fair to a lot of veterans if I were to come on television and say, I'm a veteran, so you should listen to what I say, Jack, or your audience. So I wanted to, when you brought that up, I'm proud of my service, but I don't want to use that as a way to have people like me more or listen to what I have to say as a lawyer. I don't mean that falsely.
You're so kind.
No, but I don't mean it that way. You know what I mean?
Okay, I understand.
You would feel the same way, Jack, that I do.
Understand.
But I wanted to say something
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And my dear audiences, today with my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnston, we are touching base with some law ABCs. I believe it is one of the New Year resolution deserve to be made for our show at this CNE TV to bring some education, basic education of our legal system, our court system, even trial court system. With me is my good friend, Mr. Thomas Johnson, a very nice person, and I really like I like your mind. Yeah, you're honest, generous-minded. Thank you very much, my dear audiences. That wraps up the show. I believe that answers lots of questions. Even though I feel I'm not done, time is up, and probably we will do it like every other week, right? Make it a bi-weekly. So we hope that you will like this show. And meantime, if you have any recommendation to make, please feel free to write to me. Say, just use the address, tellmydj@gmail.com. I will personally get to it. All right? Thank you very much. Thank you, my dear friend.